Over the few weeks in which we spent editing, the group spent time together on Adobe Premiere editing each part of our documentary. The group began by working together to create the title sequence for the documentary. We initially began by inserting the footage we filmed for the opening sequence and cutting it down to the correct sections, placing them onto the timeline for our documentary. Once we had all the opening sequence footage together, we began to work on the actual title of the documentary within the sequence. We placed an image of a Kindle on top of the book opening, which was to contain our title fading in onto the Kindle, which was also fading onto the book. After we'd added the title and Kindle onto the video track 2 and 3, we dragged the image crossover fade onto these images and onto the main footage of the book opening sequence so that it would fade fully into the start of our documentary. After successfully putting our opening sequence together, we added our audio onto it. To make the music consistent, we cut the first bar of the track Paperback Writer and copied and pasted that one bar onto the track 3 times to fill up the correct space. And then we cut up the lyrics Paperback Writer from the introduction of the track to use for the book opening sequence at the end of the opening. We then added a fade onto the end of the music so that it would not just cut out once the documentary sequence began. We initially started the documentary with our vox pops, but as we later found this was not a relevant place for them, we started off placing the cutaways that we'd recorded for the introduction into our documentary. Once we'd imported and cut up each part of the cutaway footage, we placed it on the timeline. We then repeated this process with the archive footage of book production processes during the section which was going to be used to describe this process. We then moved on to importing and cutting up the interviews that we had decided to use. We did this by following the edit decision list which we'd produced before starting the production of the documentary. As we went through our edit decision list, we made sure that the cutaways which we'd filmed for in between each interview and those which were being used to cover the jump between interviews and answers were inserted. This included a wide variety of archive footage which we used as well to highlight parts of what our interviewees were saying. The whole process took us just over a week until we were happy with what we produced and were able to add our voiceovers to the production. We imported our voiceover audio clips and split it up into each of the different sections which we required for the sections which were to lead into different topics. Some clips were a second or two too long, but we were able to cut or edit the length of the footage above so that it would fit properly. We finally added our interview graphics to the documentary. We created a title with a white round box and a black round box so that the text box for each interviewee could be seen clearly. We then added the name and profession of each interviewee in white text to allow the audience to see who they were and how they were relevant. We then made a few minor tweaks to our documentary, to the lengths and edits of the clips, until it was complete.